A judge says the man accused of killing and beheading his father and then displaying his father's head on a YouTube video before calling for violence against the government is mentally fit to stand trial. We've got an update on Pennsylvania's Justin Mohn, his competency, and what it means for his legal case with Dr. J.P. Garrison, a clinical and forensic psychologist. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. 32-year-old Justin Mohn is back in the news. Now, this is the man from Middletown Township, Pennsylvania in Bucks County, who allegedly shot his own father to death, decapitated him, and then displayed his head in a YouTube video. And unfortunately, thousands of people saw that video before it was taken down. And this gained a lot of national attention because of not only how shocking and graphic that was, but also because of what Mohn purportedly said. You see, this video was posted to YouTube with the title, "Mohn's Militia, Call to Arms for American Patriots." And in the video, Justin Mohn said his father had been a federal employee for 20 years, which Mohn believes made him a traitor. And in the video, he seems to state, violence is the only solution to the federal government's treason. And this is the head of Mike Mohn, a federal employee of over 20 years, and my father. He is now in hell for eternity as a traitor to his country. Michael Mohn, by the way, 68 years old. He was a 20-year veteran engineer with the geoenvironmental section of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Philadelphia district. And in the video, Mohn also rambles about various conspiracy theories concerning the Biden administration, immigration, the border, fiscal policy, urban crime, the war in Ukraine. According to Bucks County prosecutors, it's believed that Mohn killed his own father with a pistol and then used a kitchen knife and machete to decapitate him in the bathroom of the home. And to make this even more disturbing, it was Michael Mohn's wife who apparently finds his dead body, makes a call to 911. Law enforcement, they end up capturing the younger Mohn about 100 miles away from the crime scene at Fort Indiantown Gap Base. It's home of the Pennsylvania National Guard Training Center. He'd apparently broken into the base with a gun and was still armed when law enforcement confronted him, but authorities say he surrendered peacefully. No one was hurt. He reportedly told police that he wanted to enlist the help of the National Guardsmen and get the governor to, quote, join forces with him. He's charged with multiple counts, including murder in the first degree, abuse of a corpse, terrorism. And this brings us now to the latest development. And that was the fact that Mr. Mohn was not only denied bond, but he was ordered to have a competency evaluation to determine if he's mentally fit to stand trial. And now a Bucks County judge has decided that Mr. Mohn, in fact, can. Now, Mohn's defense attorney requested last Thursday's hearing after the defense team's psychologist said Mohn was not competent. He thought Mohn should get treatment at Norristown State Psychiatric Hospital. Then, if he was what's called restored to competency after treatment, he could then go on trial. So 2 psychologists testified at this hearing in front of Judge Stephen Corr. Cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom, but we want to get into what happened. So I want to bring in right now Dr. John Paul J.P. Garrison, a clinical and forensic psychologist. Dr. Garrison, thanks so much for coming on here on Sidebar. I wish I had a better topic to talk about, but unfortunately, this is the world we live in. What is just your first reaction when you hear about a crime like this or an alleged crime like this?
My first reaction is you do start to think about mental health or substance use or something that would drive somebody to act in ways that are well beyond what we would expect, even for a murder. So as shocking as it is, I think there could be some really serious mental health issues at play, which I don't think would shock anybody.
It's unfortunately not the first case I've covered where you have not only someone doing this or allegedly doing this to a family member, but a child doing something like this to a parent. I guess the main question is what kind of person can do what Mohn is accused of? What do you see in your practice?
So I've done a lot of competency evaluations. I've done a lot of forensic evaluations, assessments, those types of things. And I've seen when it comes to things like matricide, when somebody harms a family member in this way, we do tend to see this being related to some serious mental illness. We've certainly seen people with personality disorders, psychopaths, people like that. I haven't seen them personally, but you see serial killers that have done things like collect people's heads, as gruesome as that is. So you do have to be able to distinguish, is this somebody who's a psychopath and is engaging in this type of behavior because of something like that? Or is it somebody who is so severely detached from reality, they really don't know what's going on?
We'll explore that a little bit more, but I want to go into this idea of competency. Before we get into what each doctor found, basic level, what questions are asked during a competency evaluation and how do they work?
So in essence, what you're trying to do is establish whether or not somebody is attached enough to reality to be able to know what's going on and to participate in their own defense in some capacity. So if somebody was not attached to reality or not attached to reality during the commission of the crime, that's one thing. That's a whole different subject. But if they still don't know what's going on, they still seem to just not fully be able to grasp reality, then we start to go, okay, can they actually participate in their own defense? Do they really understand this well enough other than just superficially knowing, yes, I'm in court. Yes, this is a case of some kind. So it's really asking questions about, do they really understand what's going on? And do they, and not just in the context of court, but like, do they get what they did? Do they understand what's happened, what's going to happen next, those kinds of things?
And it's because every criminal defendant, no matter how heinous the crime is, they have a legal right to participate in their defense. They have to know what is going on, what they're charged with. It's so curious. In your practice, have you ever seen anybody who has been declared not competent to stand trial for years? There's just never been a trial because the competency was never restored?
I've definitely seen people. Yes, absolutely. There have been people who are not competent and don't ever regain competency to a degree where they could truly participate in their own defense. So absolutely, I've seen that. And for people with severe and persistent mental illness, sometimes they're just never going to be restored to competency. The question for somebody like Justin Mohn is whether or not, because I don't know his history well enough. I don't know if he has a long-standing mental health history, because there's certain things that have to be there at 32 years of age for him to have had this kind of break.
Disturbing story. Disturbing world. Everything is so unpredictable. Like, for example, let me just bring this up. If you get hurt, that's something that comes out of nowhere. But that is why I want to talk to you real quick about Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm, our proud sponsor. This is a team you may want in your corner, an emphasis on team, because not only do they have 1,000 attorneys, but their clients also get a dedicated army that includes case investigators, paralegals, customer case specialists, all focused on maximizing their settlements. And Morgan & Morgan is a firm that has secured multi-million-dollar settlements and verdicts across this country. The whole process can be done from your smartphone. It is so easy. There's no upfront fee. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. All right, well, let's get into a little bit of these questions because Mr. Mohn himself also answered questions during this hearing. According to local media reporting on the hearing in court, Mohn was polite. He was smiling during the hearing. He was telling the judge he understood why he was there, that the charges he faced. So again, kind of goes to the idea of maybe he really is competent. So we have Dr. John Markey, who testified for the defense. He told the court that while he understands Mohn understands what's going on, he can't help with his own defense because he suffers from a delusional disorder, meaning he holds beliefs that don't have any basis in reality. For example, while quoting from some of Mohn's own notes from earlier this year, Dr. Markey said that Mohn eventually stopped cooperating and meeting with his defense attorney because he believes the lawyer was part of a government conspiracy to stop Mohn from becoming, quote, the rightful king of America, possibly the world. There's another note that reportedly reads, Americans hate God. Americans think Justin Mohn is God. Americans hate Justin Mohn. So he's, obviously seemingly equating himself to God. And starting in early April, Mohn stopped speaking to his public defender altogether, saying he was fired. Mohn submitted a handwritten request for a new court-appointed attorney. At the end of the hearing, Judge Court granted that request. But Dr. Garrison, I mean, doesn't that feel like a serious issue of competency there?
It does. And for people that have, there are different types of delusions we see, different types of psychosis. And when someone's what we call disorganized, in other words, making no sense, very easy to say, okay, this person cannot participate. But when you have somebody who's bright or somebody who has paranoid delusions but really can talk deeply about these, it becomes much more complicated because superficially they seem like, well, they know what's going on. They're able to talk about this. But if you really get into the depth of their delusions, sometimes you go, okay, maybe they really aren't quite as with it as they seem.
And that's the problem, right? He might say, I understand the charges, but hey, my attorney's part of this is part of the government's conspiracy to lock me up. He's an enemy. That feels to me a significant issue. I guess do you think it's the judge didn't quite believe it, or do you think the judge said, you know what, I don't, that might be the case, but he's entitled to pick an attorney who he wants, and this is not an issue of competency, this is something else?
I think unless you've really worked with a lot of folks like this, it can be very hard to make that judgment. And so the judge may have seen people that are much more severe, and maybe he just doesn't seem severe enough for him, and maybe he doesn't maybe the judge fully appreciates it, but maybe he doesn't fully appreciate the depth of distortion and sort of derangement in somebody like this. So I would think that maybe if he had a better understanding of just how detached he sounds, that he might think differently about him truly being able to participate in his own defense and really understand what's going on.
Let me ask you this. I know you haven't had an opportunity to evaluate Mr. Mohn yourself, but if we take everything that I just laid out as true, that he wrote that he believes that, there are kind of these illusions of grandeur, right? I mean, what would you take away from this? What would be a diagnosis? I know that's tough to say in your capacity because you haven't evaluated him, but does this telltale characteristics of something you've seen before?
Something that we oftentimes see with something like schizophrenia or some of the diagnoses that are related to psychosis, these are very common: grandiose delusions, paranoia. So when you see people that have schizophrenia of the paranoid type, these are the types of behaviors we see. Obviously, as you said, I haven't evaluated him, but superficially, this very much looks like that type of psychosis.
Very interesting you say that, because Dr. Kelly Chamberlain testified on behalf of the prosecution, the state of Pennsylvania. And she agreed that Mr. Mohn had some unusual comments, but she didn't think that this amounted to schizophrenia or delusion, and that he was in fact competent, that he could participate in his criminal case. Now, Mohn's public defender questioned Dr. Chamberlain about certain actions that were taken by Mohn, including letters to the governor requesting a pardon, as well as a Russian diplomat asking that Vladimir Putin consider giving him asylum. Dr. Chamberlain admitted that while it may not be easy for an attorney to work with Mohn, that didn't mean he was incompetent. He never gave her any signs in the apparently 2 hours that she was with him that he wasn't mentally fit. So, Dr. Garrison, you have two diametrically opposed conclusions here. What do you take away from Dr. Chamberlain's statement and evaluation?
It's curious to me in the sense that a lot of what we hear is very stereotypical of schizophrenia, actually. So it seems to fit very well, but maybe there's something he saw. Maybe there's very specific reasons that he thinks, okay, this isn't consistent. Like if we go back to a case like Letitia Stauch last year, she was faking it. And maybe there's more to this that I'm not seeing, or that I would feel differently about if I knew more about it. One thing we know is that for issues like that, they start between about the ages of 18 to 21. So it's not like it would magically start at 32. So if he'd never had any symptoms prior to this, we would have to go, okay, well, it's not something like schizophrenia because that doesn't start at 32. So there could be other elements involved that I haven't seen. But on the surface, it really does seem to fit pretty well, actually.
It's just, here's the thing that it troubles me from a legal point of view. Obviously, from an evidentiary point of view, from a case point of view, evidence seems pretty strong and feels like he murdered his father. I think that's going to be an easy case to prove. Where I'm concerned is just what the relationship is going to be between him and defense counsel during the course of the trial. And does he understand exactly the arguments that are going to be put forward on his behalf? Does he understand the process? Because I thought this was interesting. Apparently, as I said, Mohn fired his attorney for being, quote, unethical and subversive. And now he wants an attorney who is Christian and one who believes that what he allegedly did was justified under the law, which I will tell you is going to be very tough to argue. I don't think there's a justification kind of argument. And at the time of this recording, the judge has to sign off on that change of attorney request. It's being reported, though, that another attorney is set to jump in. But again, I go back to you, Dr. Garrison. I'm confused. If he really has these extreme beliefs about his actions and the law and what he wants his defense attorney to do, I feel that that is a significant competence issue. Maybe the judge feels he's faking it, but if he's not, I don't understand how you continue on with the trial. I'm confused.
I'm confused as well. There's elements of this that just seem... I can't see how they could make an argument for murder as far as what his motivations would be and all of this. It's confusing because I really don't think that he's going to be... let me rephrase. I think that he's too paranoid to truly accept the advice of any counsel. I think he's going to grow paranoid as soon as they do anything that goes against his delusion, because that's very much his reality. Assuming that he's not faking this, that's absolutely what he believes. So as soon as somebody pushes against that, as soon as somebody says something that he disagrees with, all of a sudden, you're part of the conspiracy. I need a new attorney. So we're going to see a Sarah Boone-like situation potentially, where he would just keep going through attorneys if he was capable of firing them, so to speak.
Well, and maybe I was a little premature to say that it seems like a very easy guilty verdict, because I want to talk about the insanity defense while I have you here. And my understanding is, for purposes of Pennsylvania law, the phrase legally insane, and correct me if I'm wrong, means that at the time of the commission of the offense, the actor was laboring under such a defect of reason from disease of the mind as to not know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or, and I think this one probably applies more to Mr. Mohn's case, because I think he probably understood what he was doing with his father. If the actor did know the quality of the act, that he did not know that what he was doing was wrong. Walk me through the probability of success of mounting an insanity defense here on behalf of Mr. Mohn.
So I think you described it perfectly. I think that's exactly the same way that I see the insanity defense. And basically, you really do have to be able to have somebody say in very specific terms why what they did was, why they truly believe it was justified, and for it to truly be ingrained in a delusion. So like if they believe their family, somebody was a demon or something like that, and that they thought that they were doing something for religious reasons. I mean, we've literally seen that. And so his is so strange because it has more to do with paranoia about the government. And so it becomes a much harder, it's harder for people to process, I think, because it sounds almost grounded. I mean, obviously he takes it to a very far extreme, but it's like, okay, he's not talking about aliens or demons or anything like that. He's talking about being paranoid about the government. So it's going to be harder for people to see the level of derangement, I think, and to understand that, it's possible that he's so far removed from reality, he thought he was doing the right thing. And maybe he didn't. Maybe he did know at the time, yes, I know that murder is wrong. I know killing my father is wrong, but I'm choosing to do it anyway. So that'll be for him hard, I think.
It seems different than a classic case where somebody commits a murder, then they try to cover it up. They try to run away from police. Right. The fact that he commits this takes, I mean, I hate to say this, but he takes the head, puts it on YouTube, and seems to think that he's going to get support, tries to get the support from Governor Josh Shapiro, that he goes to the military base. I mean, I want to be clear, I am not justifying this, but I'm talking from a legal point of view, whether the insanity defense can work here. I usually say 9 times out of 10, it's not going to work. I have to say, because of the graphic nature of this and what he's accused of doing and some of these statements, there could be something here, assuming, by the way, he decides to have an attorney that he likes represent him appropriately.
Right. I'm very conservative when it comes to the insanity defense. I typically, it's very rare that I really lean into that. But there's some cases that are so extreme and so unusual that you go, it's hard to look at it from. If there is a case where it could apply, this would seem like one of those, very likely.
And Dr. Garrison, before I let you go, how do those psychological exams work? Because let's say this is an insanity defense case. I'm sure you're going to have prosecution experts. You're going to have defense experts, battle the experts determine, was he insane at the time? What are those evaluations like? What can we expect if that's where this case goes?
So in essence, when you do a competency evaluation on somebody, you do a long interview, you find out as much about their history as you can, and then you give what we refer to as objective measures. So basically, oftentimes it's them filling out questionnaires, those types of things, and then we look at how they responded versus what we would expect in somebody who really understands what's going on, understood what they did. Because oftentimes people get it wrong. People try to fake this a lot. The vast majority of competency evaluations I've done actually are people that are trying to convince you. They'll get confused. They think that they're supposed to have been crazy then, but not now, or vice versa. People get this stuff all wrong. So there's just a certain pattern you look for to go, okay, the way that this person's responding to these questions, to these measures, I don't believe, or I do believe that they were or weren't able to understand what's going on or what they did, those kinds of things.
And I'll tell you, Mohn's preliminary hearing is scheduled for later this month, so we will see the prosecution's evidence, or partially their evidence, to see if there's enough to bound this case over for trial. If I were a betting man, I would say I think that there is. But Dr. J.P. Garrison, thank you so much for coming on, really breaking down what is a bizarre and sick case. But thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.